Hey class, welcome to fall semester. Fall semester. And this is the first lecture of History 427. And I'm just going to talk a little bit today about South Africa in general, and also talk a little bit about Hottentot Venus, which is the first major book you'll read. Now, the way I have the class structured, uh, we have a textbook, the Shillington History of Africa, which talks about Africa in general, which kind of puts South Africa within the context of the greater African continent. And also, I have you reading three specialized books, the Crace and Scully book on Hottentot Venus. I have you read Native Life in South Africa, uh, which is a very famous book. I'm having a brain cramp right now. I cannot remember the guy who wrote that book. Oh my goodness, I don't have it in my hand right now. But Native Life in South Africa, which is a book written by one of the founding members of the ANC, which, the African National Congress, which is the dominant political party in South Africa. And so it's a really crucial book in showing how African political consciousness began to form itself in the 20th century. Now, another book I have you read is a book which is a biography of Dr. Kumar, who was also a president of the ANC. And he's also an example of educated Xhosas who would go on to become, really the dominant group in the ANC. And because if you look at if you look at South Africa, the first two presidents, three of the first four presidents, yeah, three of the first four presidents since independence, Mandela, um, gosh, I'm just forgetting names today. The fellow who came after him, and the current president. Those three are all of Xhosa origin. And I know I kind of mispronounced the click. If anybody ever sees the video, don't beat me up about that. I like to kind of put the clicks in there, but I know my pronunciation of South African clicks leaves a lot to be desired. But anyway, but three of those guys come from the Xhosa. I'll just anglicize the Xhosa background. Whereas, President Zuma was Zulu. And so the book on Alfred Kumar, I got his name again now, that's good. It's a good example of people from that background. And also it's a good example of some of the adjustments that had to be made in order for the political movement in South Africa to really begin to challenge minority rule. Now, in addition to the books, I'm going to have you guys look at some movies. We're going to look at Cry the Beloved Country. We'll also watch the Nos Mandela movie, No Easy Walk to Freedom. Both of those are commercial movies. And, I suppose I could have you read the books, but I think it's kind of nice to see the dramatization because even though there are dramatizations, they are talking about historical events, and that kind of puts it in perspective. And at the very end of the class, towards the very end of the semester, we're going to talk about some contemporary political issues going on in South Africa. South Africa is in the news a bit lately because, like the United States, they are really being hit pretty heavy by COVID-19. By and large, COVID-19 has not hit Africa that hard. But in South Africa, COVID-19 has been a major issue. Probably because in South Africa you have some of the factors surrounding urban poverty that you also find in the United States. And so for that section, I'm going to post current readings and post a few videos for you all to study. Now, in this class, unlike a lot of online classes, I'm not going to do discussion. I'm just going to have you guys do your papers, / exams. There'll be 4 of them. And I just want you guys to read the material, watch the videos that I post for you, and then take your time and write good stuff. And closer to the time when you all have to write your first assignments, I will give you written and video instructions to tell you, what I'm looking for when you write those exams. Now, as for South Africa itself, now I'm not going to stick a map up here right now, but you all have books and you have access to the internet. And if you look at Africa, South Africa is the southernmost country on the African continent. And South Africa, is at the very end. It's the southernmost country, but it also encompasses a couple of countries too. I mean, Botswana, which is in the northeast corner, is almost completely surrounded by South Africa, except for a little bit that borders Mozambique. And Lesotho, which is kind of is completely surrounded by central South Africa. Lesotho is always a country I find kind of interested in. And, hopefully I'll get over there before I retire, because it's been a country I've always wanted to visit, because it's like the one country in Black Africa that, really has cold winters. I mean, it's a very mountainous country. A lot of it's, I think like the lowest part of Lesotho is like 5,000 or 6,000 feet above sea level, and a lot of it's over 10,000 feet above sea level. And so because of that, it gets a lot of snow. And it's the only country in sub-Saharan Africa where you have ski lodges. And so I always thought that was pretty cool. Botswana was also in the news recently, and this is something we'll talk about towards the end of class, because of sexual harassment in blue jean factories. I mean, Botswana has a major blue jean industry, has a major textile industry, a big portion of which is blue jeans. And they've been running into some issues with sexual harassment there that really have deep roots in Southern African culture. But like I say, that's something that we'll talk about towards the end. But as I said before, South Africa is at the southern point of Africa. South Africa is an interesting country. Now, I posted 3 films about indigenous Southern African languages. And in particular, those videos I posted all showed examples of the clicks in Southern African languages. Clicks like, I can't get that pop good. Let me see if I can get that pop there. I can't get it. I mean, if you hear somebody from South Africa, Namibia, or Zimbabwe, I mean, that sounds just like somebody is just popping a balloon or something to get some nice, good pop. And my native English-speaking tongue just can't quite make that move. But the reason I like to show that is that linguists look at South African languages and the fact that you have such a great proliferation of consonants in those languages. And they say that is evidence of how old South African languages are. There is some speculation that modern Homo sapiens as we know our species, has its origins in Southern Africa. Now, there's that's been deflated a bit lately because, in the last several years, there have been skeletons that people believe are Homo sapiens that were found in the far north of Africa, in Morocco. But the point to be made is that, there is no doubt so far, unless somebody really finds some incredible paleontological evidence. There's no evidence that would go against the notion that Homo sapiens first appears on Earth on the African continent. And it's interesting to note that the Khoisan people, the people who live in Southern Africa today, and who once lived over a much wider stretch of Africa, appear to have the oldest languages that we know of. And this is because those languages have such a large number of consonants in them. And so that's why I posted multiple videos of people speaking those languages. Now, one of the things that's particularly noteworthy is that if you look at some of the videos, you'll see Khoisan people, and, they're pretty distinctive looking people. They tend not to have particularly big frames, especially the San people. They tend not to have big frames. They're kind of yellowish, light brown complected. They have what anthropologists refer to as Epiphanic Foes And Epiphanic Foes is what in we might refer to as kind of slanted, or the kind of eye shape that is generally associated with people from Eastern Asia. It's very common in that part of Africa. Now, the thing that's particularly noteworthy is that the book we're going to read about, the book we're going to read first, The Hottentot Venus, is a book that deals with a woman by the name of Sarah Bartmann. And I also supplied you all a film about a woman who says, am I related to Sarah Bartmann? And I like showing that film because she is, she may not be literally related to Sarah Bartmann, but she is a modern day person from what's generally referred to as the colored community in South Africa. These are people who are largely of Khoi or San. And really now the Khoi and San people are the same people. The San people are the people that you saw in the films who are hunter-gatherers. They tend to be very slim people. Now, you don't really have too many people nowadays. You don't really have people nowadays who are properly Khoi. I mean, all those people ended up being captured in the colonial economy. And they either became enslaved or they moved off on their own and became known as other groups such as Karana, or also the Bastas, which is the Dutch version of the word bastard, which referred to the fact that these were people of mixed race heritage. They were of, they often were the product of Dutch or Afrikaner farmers and indigenous women. And so therefore the Khoi people are gone. But really, like I said, the Khoi people and the San people genetically were the same people. It's just that the San people were hunter-gatherers. They tended not to grow as big because, frankly, if you got to walk 20 miles a day and get a few berries, and if you're lucky, shoot a rabbit or something, that does not lend itself to getting big. You tend to be thin, wiry. Whereas the Khoi people, they raised cattle. They were cattle herders. And so therefore they had a steady diet of milk. They ate some beef, but the thing about a lot of herders, and this is something you see, like for instance in northeastern Africa among the Somali people, or in Kenya among people like the Maasai, is that quite often these folks would prefer to milk their cows as opposed to eat them because, obviously you can only eat a cow one time. You can milk it, for years. And so if your wealth is based in cattle and you depend on them for food, it makes a lot more sense to depend on a renewable resource like milk than meat, which like I said earlier, you can only do it one time. Now the other thing about the Khoi people too is that a lot of the Khoi people lived on the coast of South Africa. And the coast of South Africa is a very rich coast. There's a lot of wildlife there. You have penguins, you have a lot of seals, sea lions, whales come there, a lot of fish. And so people who lived in the coastal area also had access to a great deal of seafood. And so, which could be anything from seals to whales that got trapped in tidal pools, to fish. And so therefore, if you have a lot of milk and you have a lot of seafood, so that's a very nutritious, very protein-dense diet. And so it's not a surprise that these people tended to grow bigger than the San people who were subsistence hunters. And like I said, you walk 20 miles and maybe hope you get a rabbit or a small antelope, as opposed to somebody who can just go milk a cow or maybe catch a fish or catch clams or something and eat them. Now, because South Africa is so far south, most of the country is not tropical. And matter of fact, the southern part of South Africa, the area where Sarah Bartmann, who became the Hottentot Venus, was from, this is an area that, has a pretty substantial winter. It's not cold like Chicago or something, but they routinely get temperatures below freezing. People in higher altitude places, like I mentioned Lesotho earlier, they get snow. And, frost is common. I mean, I've been down in Cape Town, and I've seen it snow on Table Mountain. I've seen, you get storms where you get snow flurries. And so the point to make is that this part of Africa is not tropical. Also, it's very significant to note that it does not get, typically, it doesn't have the same weather patterns as tropical Africa. It has weather patterns really like Southern Europe. They have hot, dry summers and pretty cold, wet winters. And so what we see is that, like the fellow who wrote the book Junk, Guns, Germs, and Steel, he made the point that, Southern Africa, Jared Diamond is his name. He made the point that Southern Africa, because it has a Mediterranean-style climate, was a place that was really ideal for European colonization. Most of Africa is tropical, and as a tropical part of the world, it had a lot of diseases to which Europeans did not have resistance, and also European-style crops didn't necessarily do well there. And so that's one reason why you don't see a ton of people of European extraction who moved into tropical Africa. The exception being a place like Kenya, which has a very, very high altitude and allows, the interior of Kenya has a high altitude. And Europeans had found living conditions there that were fairly close to what they would experience in Europe. Now, because of this, especially as European sailing technology improved and Europeans, particularly the Dutch, the first the Portuguese, the French, British, and the Dutch also began to establish trading empires in Asia. It's not surprising that South Africa would eventually come to the attention of Europeans. The first European to actually reach the southern tip of Africa was Bartolomeu Dias in 1487. And eventually Vasco da Gama, he would actually circumnavigate Africa and get to India. And so by the early 16th century, by the 1500s that is, it was clear to people in Europe that southern Africa was a place that would be ideal to control. Because if they controlled it, that would allow them to resupply ships that were heading to Asia. And it would allow whatever European country had control of southern Africa, it would allow them to control sea lanes. And so the Dutch get it first. And then eventually, by the early 1900s, the British get it and hold on to it into the 20th century. But anyway, Sarah Bartmann, who was a Khoikhoi person, she was among many millions of Africans in what nowadays is the Republic of South Africa that got caught up in this process. Now, Sarah Bartmann is very important for a number of reasons. As you all will read the book, you will see that her case, and like that one film I showed you about the death of Sarah Bartmann, it talks about the French anatomist Cuvier, Georges Cuvier, who did an autopsy of her. He met her when she was alive, and if you all read the book, you all will see that there's a little bit more to that story than that short film I showed you said. He met her when she was alive, and when she died, he did an autopsy on her. And, you had the contradictory situation where he says how intelligent she is, and, her multilingual ability and a lot of things. But yet, once she's dead and he dissects her and he does an autopsy and then dissects her, he proceeds to argue that her physical features were like that of a monkey or an ape. He argued that she was, not truly a member of Homo sapiens. And so that's where you get into the kind of contradictory situation about Sarah Bartmann. People in Europe were fascinated with Sarah Bartmann because of her figure. Like the young woman in the short video I showed you, am I related to Sarah Bartmann? She's an African woman with a figure type that is very common among African women, where she has very, very prominent hips and a rather large and shapely backside, much more so than you would see in women from Asia or Europe or the Americas. And because that body type was not as common, as well as the fact that, having hair that's kind of kinky and doesn't hang down is not as common, those traits uh, were described as being aberrant or maybe unattractive. Now, the irony, of course, is that although many people in Europe, talked about Sarah Bartmann as being unattractive, there was also a great deal of fascination with her figure. And, to this day right now, we see people, the obvious example would be somebody like the Kardashians, white women who had cosmetic surgery to give them rear ends that approximate what one would see in women of African descent. And, that wasn't anything new. I mean, you had clothing like bustles in the 19th century that pretty much did the same thing. And so you have this contradiction where at one level, the African body type is described as less than human. But at another level, there was a clear attraction to it. And so this is something we're going to talk about a lot with this book. And so basically, I'd say, look at maps of South Africa on your own time. Kind of get an idea what things are. Get an idea of where South Africa is in relation to the rest of the continent. And also dig in on that book. There's a lot of good, I think it's a very interesting book. I think you all will enjoy it. And I will talk to you later on this week. Have a good rest of your day and enjoy those videos and reading that I've assigned to you. Take care.